Logan. Audio's on.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good to see you.
It was not a joke.
How are you? How are you doing? Not expect to sit.
It's going to be loud because of this.
Nice.
I know. I'm in trial.
It's good? You sure? Even for up there? You sure? Okay.
What's she through? What's that? Nice. Who do you have? English. You just got my debate page for 3 years.
This is AI.
I haven't read it either. It's like not super well known. You going to the office this week?
Right? Exactly.
Oh, great. I'll see you then tomorrow. I know I'll be there, but have you?
Watching the things and the
I forgot you were in here. I love how we like spill everything in the office. It's so much fun. Also, the more that
I think I know who it is.
you work
Just
you'll get fired no matter what. Yeah.
We're going to get started in just a few minutes, but talk about yourself.
I love
my
it.
friend took this picture.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's so fun. It's a great community.
It's literally just
Yeah,
music.
basically. So we start meeting and then I think it's more like a 6-7 hour commitment. So it is kind of a lot. Yeah, exactly. But like the potential rewards. We should also do the land. Yeah. Or yeah, we both work at Arizona.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Hi everyone, welcome to our very first Discourse Series forum of the 25-26 school year. Give our panelists and yourselves a round of applause. I'm going to be your host and moderator, Ted McLoof. Just a few things before we get started today. If you are unaware of our whole entire program, we are the U of A Discourse Series. We try to put on monthly forums to talk about what's on students' minds, what's on the community's minds, and try to elevate the level of discourse and talk to each other in a way that's actually going to be productive and respectful. Tonight we have not a debate, but just sort of an open discussion. We have 3 faculty members, we have 3 students who are talking about a very important issue, which is the future of AI and education. I'm sure that any of you, whether you're students or not, are pretty aware of the fact that this is an issue that's on the forefront of most people's minds. You're probably using AI in some of your classrooms yourselves. Don't raise your hand if you're one of my students. So So we're going to talk tonight about just sort of the different experiences that we all have, because all of us come from different disciplines. Everyone up on this panel, including myself. I think probably something that's really important to note is that no one up here is from any of the STEM fields. So we're all going to be approaching this from something that's closer to the humanities, something that's closer to sort of like how it is that we are recognizing human interaction being taken over a little bit by AI. So I'm just going to go ahead and kick it off and get started, and I'll allow our three student panelists to introduce themselves and their majors, and then I'll introduce our three faculty members. So, Abby, you want to kick it off?
Hi everyone, I'm Abby. I'm a sophomore here at the U of A, and I'm majoring in global studies with a minor in Spanish.
My name's Logan. I'm also a sophomore. I'm studying history, political science, and law.
My name is Peyton Hussman. I'm a senior studying interdisciplinary studies with an emphasis in global and cultural studies.
Okay, I like that. That Peyton was the one who said, make sure that everyone projects, and then he spoke the quietest of anybody who was up here. I'll just introduce myself as Ted McLoof, and I not only run debate series, but I also teach English and especially creative writing here at the school, so I'm happy to sort of talk about how the arts are being affected by AI. And we have Brian Holstrom, who?
Hi, Brian Holstrom. I'm a U of A alum. Last 20 years I've been teaching down the street at South Point Catholic High School. I teach all advanced placement world history courses. So this topic's really engaging to me because my younger students are obviously emulating what college kids are doing, and that's using a lot of AI. Teaching history's meant I've got a real passion for disruptive technologies, printing press, advent of the internet. I would say I've got a pragmatic approach to this whole thing. So looking forward to questions and dialogue.
I think Brian's probably the most probably optimistic, if not pragmatic, of everybody who's up here on the panel.
Sure.
Great, and then we have Susie Dovey.
So I'm in the School of Government and Public Policy. I also have a courtesy appointment in the Philosophy and Gender and Women's Studies Department, and I am worried about the democracy in the United States. So I teach a course on how democratic is the United States. I also teach a class on truthiness and politics, and where we blur what happens in a democracy when you no longer believe in truth.
Great. And we also have Patty McClure.
Yes, hi, I'm a journalism professor. I just recently joined the faculty. I worked for 26 years as a journalist in the print industry, the dying print industry. But I'm optimistic about journalism. And going off of what Susie shared, I'm concerned about democracy, and I feel like a robust press is a key to saving democracy. I am not that knowledgeable about AI yet. I had a visceral response because I'm from the old school of, walking the streets and talking to people and getting your own information from public records and, vetting your own data. And so I'm a skeptic, but I'm trying to be a little bit more open.
Great. Okay, well, thank you to all our panelists. I'm just going to kick things off by throwing out what I think is often used as a sort of metaphor here, which is sometimes we'll hear that AI is like when we first had calculators, that all of a sudden people were super freaked out because no one was going to learn how to do their math, and calculators were going to cut that out, but we all got used to it and everything was fine and we moved forward. And that again, because we're coming from, I think this the humanities, it hits my ear the wrong way because I see that as sort of more a step toward efficiency, right? We're sort of moving closer to getting the answer so that we can then do the next thing and think critically about whatever we need to do with math. But I do think that we are cutting out some of the critical thinking, or I fear that we're cutting out some of the critical thinking. Again, if we're speaking about the classroom and challenging students to really think about their own ideas and what we're talking about in the classroom and sort of come to conclusions on their own, I do get sort of concerned sometimes that AI is doing that work for them rather than acting as a tool to assist them. So I'm going to throw to our students first. And again, don't out yourselves if you've ever done this, but do you feel as though either you yourselves or other students that you've seen, do you feel that sometimes that is used in sort of the wrong way, and what do you see the wrong and right way to be?
Yeah, I think it's definitely used in the wrong way. I know you just said I'm still gonna out myself. To get around sort of the guilt of having AI write stuff for me, I would sort of resort to, like, as a last ditch effort, like, hey, what kind of things should I be putting in this paper? What kind of things should I be putting in this video? And we discussed this in our podcast last Friday. And one of the interesting things that Peyton's friend brought up is that's probably the worst thing that you can do. Because AI is really good at like perfecting your grammar and your spelling. What it can't do is decide what ideas you put in the paper, and that's essentially what I was having to do. So that kind of gave me a new perspective. Like, I don't feel the guilt of having AI write it for me, but it's deciding essentially what I'm going to put into the paper, and that's just as worse, if not the worst. So that's my perspective.
Do any of you as teachers see this happening in your classroom? And how do you find out? Like, how do you suspect that AI is being used, and how do you sort of definitively call someone out on it?
So I have a perfect example.
Great.
So I was teaching the ethics and public policy class, and everything I read about ethical thinking said you have to get students to think for themselves about their ethical point of view before you apply them. And so I asked them to do a moral report card on themselves. What I said was like, what would a good person be evaluated? So if you said honesty, you had to say, are you an A honest person or a E honest person, and define what you mean by honesty. All the students have the same definitions in their moral report card. So it was pretty easy, and it wasn't integrity was what you do when you're alone in the room.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, and this is the thing I like about the calculator metaphor is it's not doing your thinking for you. It's like, actually I feel like the line between what you're thinking and what's the computer thinking is blurring. So students don't, I think it's like using Grammarly, like you just think of it as a tool, right? But I think it's replacing becoming a clearer thinker.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I wanted to add one other thing, which is
Yep.
the metaphor is really about AI, is we're anthropomorphizing machine. It's not so much it's a calculator, we're thinking of it as a human, and as humans, we don't know what intelligence is.
Sure. Thoughts?
I mean,
Yeah.
I totally agree with that take. I usually use AI as an organizational tool, so when I'm creating papers, I put in my own ideas and thoughts, and I just sometimes have it create an outline for me, and I think that initially I was viewing that as a tool and more me manipulating AI instead of AI manipulating me. However, as time has gone on, I feel like I'm kind of losing the ability to structure my own papers, and that thought kind of scared me a little bit. So I've taken a step back from using it as a tool because my eyes have kind of been open to how progressive that can be.
Well, and you had
Right.
mentioned, Abby, in the podcast that there's a sort of muscle in your brain that you sort of
Yes.
like need to keep on working, and if you don't, then it ends up kind of like being relaxed. But Brian, you and I were talking the other night about maybe it's not losing that muscle in your brain. Maybe it's just sort of like using that muscle for a different for a different avenue. So do you wanna
Yeah.
lose it?
I neglected to mention, so I teach history, but I also served on our school's like small committee to decide policy. And I would say I was one of the first people in our community to say, hey, this is gonna be really disruptive. Like, this is not something that's just a calculator. And reflecting on what Susie just said, that was one of our key things is we wanna have AI be practically used, but avoid displacing the processes you're talking about. In particular, call it muscles or cognitive abilities. And I've tried to convince a lot of our faculty that traditional homework, the way they've decided, is dead. And instead, if you really want students thinking, if you want to assess their thinking, it's got to happen in class. Or it's got to happen in places. It used to be my history courses, it'd be knowledge retention, like, let me tell you a story, and can you retain it, and can you study it? Where now it's more, we're training to be historians and to think critically, and so yeah, designing assessments to assess what really we're hoping learning looks like, because traditional homework, traditional like knowledge retention, those kinds of things have gone the way of the dodo.
Yeah. Okay, yes.
Yeah, so I think I'm in a unique position with the class, one of the classes that I teach especially, which is advanced reporting. And they have to source all their information, they have to run their own queries on the data, they have to put it through public records. And if they write, since writing journalistically is very specific, if they use AI, I can tell immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And all I have to do is just open up their assignment and I know that it's AI, and I just write them a note and say you need to resubmit this
Sure.
using your own brain. So I don't allow AI at all in that class under any circumstances. It is prohibited because I want them to learn how to find people. I mean, journalism is very much about people who illustrate the social issues or the political issues or whatever it is that they're writing about on their own, and write about it in their own voice.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're saying in their own voice, because I wonder, like again, like no offense to students, but like I wonder if you guys realize how obviously AI, the things that you can do when you're educated in AI are, because it's a giant red flag when you know, AI always uses those bullet points, you know, like where they have like a big bold thing, they let you know whatever they're talking about, and it's always, you know, very generic, right?
The writing is terrible.
Yeah, the writing is really bad. But I think that again, like it's our job as educators to let students know that really good writing doesn't mean that you're using, you know, $25 words, right? It doesn't mean that you're using a sort of like elevated language. It means that it's the thought behind the writing that makes good writing, right? So I'll throw it back to the students. So do you guys know how obvious it is when you're using AI, how bad the writing is and how obviously computerized it is?
I certainly do, and I like to think a lot of us do, but at the same time, kind of to play devil's advocate, like I imagine some students just don't see the value in having their own voice, especially with such a powerful tool that we know is only going to get stronger at their disposal, right? I, for one, have like flirted with the idea, but I went to a high school where it was like a college prep high school, and they pretty rigorously reinforced like the efficacies of having your own voice, having your own style, your own personality. But for the likes of like a job market or somebody who doesn't have that kind of convention ingrained in them during high school, they might simply not see the purpose for having your own voice or not resorting to something like AI.
Well, look, I want to hang on that high school experience really quickly, because at least Patty and Susie and I we've been teaching higher education, so I don't think we really experienced the shift that happened during COVID, right? That I think affected a lot of this stuff. It was a sort of like 1-2 punch of like trying to really threaten students working really hard and doing critical thinking when we went remote, and then right after that, when we got out of those remote classes, AI appeared on the scene. So I'd love to sort of talk, I'd love to hear you guys' experience, like having had to go through that, and Brian as well, because you obviously taught during that. How did sort of like going remote and having COVID affect how it is that like your idea of like being in school and how necessary that was, and how it affected maybe using AI as a shortcut?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely decreased like student morale in like all qualities. I guess like kind of the stories that I have, this has to do more with like prevention, which I think is relevant. Is in my senior class, history, this would have been 2023, 2024. Is we would just have the readings every week, and then we'd have a weekly discussion in class in groups, and then we would grade our peers on performance. So when it came time for your term paper, you would engage in the material so much that like there was no need to use AI.
Yeah.
And then when I got here, a class that I took last spring, it was a law class. Their policy was at the end of all your papers, just say how you use AI. Did you use it for sources, idea generation? Just tell us how you used it. And now I'm in a history class where all of our writing is just in class. So it's like a very interesting trajectory of like kind of the lengths instructors are going to try to prevent people from using AI. And obviously it depends on the person in the class, but there's a lot of differences in my view.
Yeah, and then just to kind of build off of that, COVID hit, my senior year was online for me, so 2021, and we all shifted to online. I had most of my high school experience in person, so I kind of built the relationships, built the morale, the reasonings for caring at least a little bit. But nonetheless, one thing that happened when online learning hit the scene was our experiential learning was basically decimated. I think that any student, any faculty member here will say like your most memorable, best teachers are probably the ones that can implement some kind of experience for you, and when you're online, that's definitely going to ruin that. And then when AI shows up, we already don't have that experience anyways, we're not feeling as engaged. Why not just cheat or take the easy route and use AI, right? I imagine that's the pipeline that a lot of students fell into.
I love this bridge. When COVID hit, trying to teach, unreal. And if you could go into my classroom, I had 4 screens. I had a screen I was presenting on, another screen that had all the kiddos in the Zoom room, and then another robot that would follow me, and I had this little marker, and it would pick up, and I could move and do my thing, but all the kids are digitally existing in some Zoom room.
Right.
And so what we figured out really quickly is, again, traditional assessments are not gonna work, because the kids can Google stuff immediately. And so that kind of accelerated this idea of authentic assessment, and I feel like that's just been exacerbated by AI. I would push back a lot, at least a little, on this notion, and I would imagine a lot of the students in this room, when teachers are saying, oh, we know, a lot of students are like, you don't know. Because to say that it writes poorly, I'd agree if you're not savvy with your prompt engineering, if you just put in a question and copy whatever it spits out, put it back in, you're right, it's pretty obvious. But I think most of the young people in the room would know, if you navigate and engineer your prompt and slice it together, it really can augment what you're doing. And the writing is really sophisticated. And so I can share stories. I mean, the first student that I caught, it was an intriguing discussion, because I spent the whole weekend trying to prove it. And then when I kind of threw my hands up and said, this is stupid, and I brought the student in and I said, look, you're a really good student, but I know you didn't write this, because I can ask you about some of your details. And so that conversation, he finally just said, yeah, I ChatGPT'd it. And then this last year, we had another teacher just go, level 10, I'm gonna get this kid. And it was parent meetings, and it was all this stuff, and they asked me to come in and try to vouch, like, oh, clearly you can prove this. And the reality is, you probably can't. It's genuinely created content that no plagiarism detector is necessarily gonna work 100% of the time.
Well, yeah, to clarify, I don't mean to suggest that, like, you can just look at it and automatically know. What I mean is, if you get to know your students.
Yeah.
And any of my students in this class know, I sit there and talk to you, and I find out what your ideas are. We talk about it beforehand. I know what your thoughts are, and so when they don't match what we talked about, and then like all of a sudden your paper's entirely different, that's what I mean is that if you're doing the work as a teacher, then you're able to put a spot.
Or their prompt engineering stinks.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry.
I think the stories that we do in my class are unique to what you said, only because you need to find real people and tell the stories of real people.
Sure.
And the details that you get when you go and talk to people who are, have been recently evicted or are addicted to fentanyl or whatever the topic is that you're writing about. These are the unique stories of these individuals. And so you can't get that detail or nuance in there through AI. And you can see it in the way that people write. And like you said, Ted, I've gotten to know a lot of my students, and I know what tickles their toes and what they're passionate about. And so they want to write their own stories.
Yeah.
Which is what I want them to do. And so I'm still hopeful that we'll at least hold on to that shred of the good old days.
Yeah, I'm okay.
But I think one of the things with the potential for big data is you could ask, I can imagine a world where you ask AI to write a response that I would write, right? And so one of the things I always start my introductory class with is like, look, you should be thinking about what you need to be able to do something a computer can't do. And before I would have said, oh, you know, you need to be a creative thinker, right? That big data, they're always going to beat you analyzing more information and crunching numbers. They've got that, right? But we have to be the creative folks. But now it looks like they're taking the creativity, not just the science away from us.
Right.
And so, you know, typically what we say about humans is that what humans are great at doing is when they have limited information, generating constructive, not being critical, but being constructive problem solving. And so, to me, I would think about your education as, does it teach you to think on your feet? Does it teach you to come up with your own perspective that you can support, right, using good information, right? This becomes like the key, not answering Siri questions, right? But answering human questions.
I think another thing that people can do, not just students, but people can do over AI is make decisions. So like, I don't necessarily have information to back this up, but my mind tells me that if you ask AI to make a decision, it will take the road most often taken. So like something that humans have a capacity to do is like take risks, take the road less traveled. And I just don't think that's something that AI will ever really replicate because it likes to be safe. So I think that's another thing that like students can just do that AI cannot replace.
Yeah, I was waiting for my wife to show up to the bar the other night, and I got into like an argument with AI because I kept on telling it like ChatGPT like, why are you helping me cheat? And it was like, I'm not helping you cheat, I'm just assisting you. And I was like, you're 100% helping me cheat. It's like, you got me, I am, and it just agrees with everything that you're saying. Sorry, I'm getting confused.
Yeah, so I think basically AIs for ChatGPT is just a really big database, and the subject is human behavior and humans. And so obviously there are a lot of different parts of the human experience that I'm not sure that a machine could replicate. But then again, there are good and bad parts of humanity, and I'm worried that ChatGPT is going to start to evolve to replicate some of those bad parts of humanity, just because we are the subject, we are the database.
So I wanna take that and just sort of maybe mold it into my last question, then we'll take some questions from the audience. But I'm interested in knowing how much of this is like our fault, not our fault, because we're great teachers, but like how much of it is like educators, administrators who did kind of let students down, especially during COVID, not really know exactly how to do things. Convince students, I think, probably not unreasonably, that like school is kind of optional. You could basically skip a year and then you could keep on going, and it doesn't really matter, and then kind of bring them back in. And like, how much is it imperative on us to convince students that like it actually does matter to be in this classroom, to think critically, to take classes that aren't maybe necessarily even part of your major, and to still sort of like engage with them? Like, how much of it is imperative on us, and how much of it is just like, let's just wave white flag and let them use AI? Yeah, go ahead.
The common ground I've heard, and Patty made me think of it first, and then Susie, is we really have to do a better job of identifying what the humanity is in the process that we're trying to do with the learning. And we need to craft learning and assessments that students buy in. Like this is the storytelling I want to be involved in. This is the human element I want to be involved in. And if we've given something that a machine can just crank out and be submitted, I mean, what have we really accomplished? So I think the onus is on us for that, and maybe all this, maybe that's a silver lining, that's my optimism, is COVID and now AI has a lot of educators really rethinking what's the human element that I don't want displaced, that I want students to buy into.
I think a good, go ahead. I think a good perspective to kind of hold on to is, Peyton's friend pointed this out to us on our podcast, is the top university officials of the top universities are talking about this exact same thing, and their ideas are no much more novel than ours. So this is a problem everywhere, and it is no single person's fault, and there's no single way to solve it for every individual.
Yeah, I think you have more faith in the top university officials than I do.
I was just gonna say, I do see, I have a friend who's a biologist, and he's told me about how wonderful it is that he can, run queries and get information. So things that used to take a week take 2 hours now. And he's working toward things that are good for people. And I do see the good there. And in investigative journalism, sometimes when stories that would take months, you could do the data queries so much faster with AI. I do see that. But I fear that we're gonna move further and further away from what makes us humans. This sounds so dramatic, but I really do feel that way because it makes us be able to be lazy. And I don't think that that's something that we should strive for. I think that and I fear that we're not gonna have the great writers emerge. People don't, I'll get into social media, but you're not ever bored, so you don't seek out the opportunities to write and create and do art. And I'm overgeneralizing because I just was walking out on.
Or you're bored all the time and you're just filling your time with
Or you're
doing
filling
that
your
instead,
time.
right?
But I have hope when there were people playing pickup soccer out there, and there were people running, and of course people are creating art, and of course some people are writing. But the further we move away from that, the more I fear we're just going to become more and more dull.
Yeah. Yeah, that is scary. Yes, Susie?
So, I guess, I don't know about the laziness, what I perceive is that people are exhausted, right? And that there's this real sense that there are huge, overwhelming problems in the world, and there's no clear course of action that we can take. And AI is both promising to give us cure cancer and cure climate control, and is this potential source, and is also going to destroy the world by taking over, having a nuclear war.
Mhm.
And so I feel like the things I feel best about AI are very task-specific projects, right? And using it for task-specific projects can free us from, honestly, the mind-numbing, soul-sucking drudgery of work, right? But I would say to the students, unless you want to have a mind-numbing, soul-sucking job, it's in your best interest to find something you genuinely love and want to learn everything about, right? And that's how you're going to avoid having a boring.
And you probably won't use AI then in your classrooms. I teach creative writing. I feel like I'm in the one field where I never have to worry about this because all of my creative writing students, I actually have to put a word maximum on their stories because I'm I know you guys want to write a whole lot, but but we have to sort of make it concise, right? Because my students really love writing. But I know that in my comp classes, which are gen eds, that are required classes, I don't blame students for going into those classes, probably starting off on day one before they find out they have an amazing teacher, being like, this sucks, and I don't really know if I really want to be here, and thank God I have this tool that I can always use if I do get bored. So you're right. Finding that thing that you're passionate about is definitely going to sort of cut out any concerns with that. I'll let the students have the last word on that, and then we'll turn to the audience for any questions you guys may have.
Yeah, so I don't think you can really blame anybody for overuse of AI because when it first started out, there wasn't a lot of information about it. We didn't know the effects it was going to have on education and students. What I've seen and observed is that AI has kind of become an addiction for students because it makes your life easier. that is basically what an addiction is. You do something that can make your life easier, and so you never want to stop doing that. And then when you establish that routine and you try to stop it, it triggers a pain receptor in your brain. And so I think that AI, like anything, can become an addiction, and I think that's what we're starting to see in students that realize the problem and want to stop when they can.
Yeah. That's terrifying.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
No. Let's go some audience questions. Yes.
Sure. I guess my question would be not just, do you think there's a role for educators and ability, not just to mitigate AI or deal with it, but to actively harness it and try to teach students how to responsibly use it so that, especially earlier on in school, that way they're still using AI, but they're using it in a way to help their education, not supplement.
Throw right to Brian on this one.
Yeah. So when we crafted our policies, that was one of the key tenets, was teaching responsible use. And I think a lot of our faculty are trying to find opportunities where they can augment their work with AI successfully, but again, not displace ultimately the human element. So I know a lot of teachers like myself, it's on-the-spot presentations, it's in-class assessments that the human element's gotta be there. But I think totally, and we just had somebody from U of A come down and speak to our whole faculty about how much it's being used at the college level, and if we're a college prep school, there's gotta be some exposure to prompt engineering and some of the different platforms that are available. So for us as adults, yeah, I mean, if this isn't going back into Pandora's proverbial box, then there's gotta be some kind of guidance for responsible.
Can I ask a question about that? I'm curious actually to hear what everyone thinks about this, because ChatGPT hit the market in 2023. I get a little bit concerned that we started to embrace the like Pandora's box thing a little bit too quickly, that we went really, really quickly. And I know administrators are very quick to go, just start using it in your classroom and start teaching with it, because I think administrators, maybe I'm being cynical, are like going to happily replace teachers with AI as quickly as they possibly can. And so I do get a little bit concerned about how quickly we've gone to the place of, let's just use it, because I feel like it's like, we bought like we developed like Fruity Pebbles, and then we threw some like a couple of carrots in it, and then we were like, go find the carrots, we promise, like that you can still do it. And it's like, why not just buy carrots? Why don't we just like boycott these Fruity Pebbles companies by like not actually like buying 10 boxes and going, then we have like then we can learn how to find the carrots better. Like I don't really get why we've been so quick to embrace it, other than the sort of like corporate sort of capitalistic one. I know that you have a pragmatic reason, but yes, it's.
So, yeah, I do think.
That carrot metaphor was really strained, I'm sorry about that.
So if you go back to the how to do something better than a computer, I think one of the things I think is what I try to do is like show you that there are different kinds of ChatGPT, and different ChatGPTs have different functions. So some will give you visuals, some will cite the sources, others will just make up shit, right? And so like being a good consumer of ChatGPT is a really important tool to have. How to write a good prompt, right, is also like, in a human voice at the college level. Like being very specific of a political science major, to use the tools effectively, because I imagine that really writing is not going to be the skills of the college educated anymore, right? Which means that in some sense, having those skills has just been democratized. But one of the things which I always like to put is like, okay, before we used to say, you have to do a critical thinking of a public policy. Well, now, one of the things I think it's not just about being like verbal, it's also about being visually literate. So being able to recognize how pairing arguments with images, right, and music, right, is a skill to think three-dimensionally that computers can help you with. You don't have to animate. You can do a deep fake, right, and have someone else do your argument.
And then just to bring back your amazing analogy, we have to consider that especially Gen Alpha has been born and raised days for their entirety of their life with the Fruity Pebbles or whatever, right? I've seen it everywhere. I work at a restaurant. The amount of kids I see with their big iPads is just in front of them the entire time. I've heard horror stories of current elementary school teachers, middle school teachers expressing a noticeable difference in this generation post-COVID and their reliance on technology, addiction to social media since they were born. Like I was born in '03, my parents said, okay, John, will kind of keep me away from that, but even now as an adult, I'm falling into cycles. I can only imagine being predisposed to this kind of reliance on technology, and then AI shows up. It's just like the next logical line, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of have something to add on to that. I guess first, like there's nothing that will stop people from pursuing entertainment, kind of to your point, and there will also be nothing to stop people from taking the path of least resistance. So like Ted, to your point of like why are some admins embracing AI? I think if we kind of take a step back and look at the educational system as a whole, we are here to essentially prepare for work, which sucks, but for the foreseeable future, that's at least how our system works. So if we kind of consider that not only are jobs going to continuously incorporate AI, some jobs are going to be taken by AI, we don't want to be just thrown into the deep end once we graduate with a bachelor's and say like, whoa, this is like something I'm completely unfamiliar with, now I'm screwed and my degree doesn't mean anything. So to your point of like why are some people embracing AI? It's to help students get that leg up on, I guess, technology.
I mean, I'm touched by your belief in admin's desire to do what's best for students. I do think that it's a little bit more sort of capitalistic than that. But I do think that a good teacher like Brian, who is actually trying to bring AI into the classroom for exactly that reason, I think you're right. There are reasons to bring it in to try to help students be more prepared for an AI future, right?
Yeah, I think that because technology is so integrated into our society and our businesses, AI sort of became that way because it uses technology. But I think that if we could be given like proper training or how to use AI, I think that could really benefit us, especially going forward. And I think it could also stop some of those like overuse addictions that I was talking
Sure.
about earlier. Because if we can just learn how to use it just like how we learn how to use technology, I think that it could potentially be beneficial for us going forward.
Let's get another. We have another question from our audience. Yeah.
Often it's kind of treated as ubiquitous that this is going to revolutionize our current way of life. And that's often kind of how it's treated. That's just going to keep getting better and better. And obviously, like none of you guys are comp sci like majors, but if you, in your experience, has it gotten better? And do you think it's going to be the printing press, or do you think it's going to be a toaster?
It's a really good question.
Did you say we're a toaster?
Or a toaster?
I'll take a swing first, and I should say, as much as I am on board with practical uses and, like you said, a sense of preparation and the media literacy that you talked about, that is one of the key uses for me. Is we're looking at different forms of media. Okay, what would ChatGPT say, and now what's the pitfall there, et cetera. But circling back to your question, I think it'll be incredibly disruptive, and more so, like we'll be in this race to keep identifying what is fulfilling as a human being. And as much as I'm using this, I would also tell you, Peyton, like I'm on the chair of the committee for banning smartphones through the school day, from bell to bell. And the most fascinating thing happens when you talk with young people and say, you know this is pretty addictive, right? And they go, yeah. And you know this probably isn't very good for your breakfast. Yeah. And so we had a trial period last spring, and it was amazing. Like lunch became lunch again. And like you said, you've all grown up with this. You've been inundated, but I do think the adults in the room and even the young people themselves are realizing how toxic a lot of this is and unfulfilling. So that is my ultimate hope is, you know, the printing press, as much as people are like, yay, everybody has the Bible now, and immediately pornography was like one of the first things rapidly printed by the printing press. And so some people's views were, this is gonna totally undermine our brains and our society. So we've been here before, but the scale is much greater. I mean, the amplification of this is so much greater. But that's my optimism is that we keep working on deciding what's fulfilling as a human being.
And Gen Z has kind of gotten screwed in that I think you you are sort of like the beta test for a lot of this stuff. Like, is it okay for you guys to have phones in schools? We don't know. We're kind of testing it out. We haven't tested it on you. Like, is it okay to do remote classes? Can you still learn? I don't know. We're sort of testing it out. Like, so I also have faith that like by the time that we get to Gen Alpha, maybe we'll have figured those things out and like started to change those policies in schools. But I don't know if we're quite there yet. But
So I was trying to think of like the perfect metaphor to respond to your question, because I think it's, and the closest thing I can think of is a double-edged sword. That on one hand, it could be an incredibly amazing tool that helps us make cancer research progress because of its ability to, again, task-oriented functions. I'm very excited about. My problem is that the information and the algorithms are built by humans, and so it has the potential to really be, from a political perspective, be incredibly destructive, and I do not trust the algorithms and no one knows how they work, right? And so we're creating something that's influencing our political behavior, and we have no agency over what's happening. And
Well, you on your podcast too discussed what happens when the general intelligence factor, it starts building and refining its own algorithms. And yeah, that's terrifying.
It's like a science fiction movie.
But I
isn't it?
also, I mean, I'm more worried. I worry less about like it sort of like informing our sort of political ideas and dividing it in that way. Because that's sort of 1984. I would worry more about Brave New World, right? I worry more about WALL-E, right? Where like it's just trying to make us so complacent that we're not even thinking about our sort of political extreme. We're just sort of like completely like deadened and just doom scrolling and not even yeah. I mean,
451 a little bit.
yeah. I mean, is that something that you three see as a possibility with each other? Like, do you see that like a lot of just like the AI slop and all that kind of stuff that comes out is sometimes more of an effect than we see the students in classrooms?
I think like the AI slop stuff is just more of an entertainment factor than anything. I mean, we're drawn to sensationalism. I think AI can produce that. But I also think, as I was saying earlier, AI just really is a big database, and it can only consume so much information. So I'm just hoping at some point the development will stop. But until then, there's no way to